with such a tenderness. And he said, be kind to them, Stephanie. They've had a hard assignment. Around and around and around in the desert. I said, what? And he downloaded on me just this analogy, and he said, you know, when he goes, think of these three generations as, think of the boomers as the generation that came out of Egypt in their youth. They weren't the older ones. They were the ones 20 and under. The ones who, yeah, they'd lived some time under slavery, but then they saw the miraculous power of God, literally delivering them. They saw, like, the Red Sea split. They saw crazy stuff happen. That happened to a lot of the boomers who saw the Jesus movement literally shake the culture. Think of Keith Green. You guys thought that Jesus was actually coming back. Then, right? Listen to all his songs. Like, his songs are all applicable now. When you listen to them, and they're like as fresh now as they were then. And so you were full of zeal and full of this, and you were, many got converted in the Jesus movement, went into ministry, all these things, and shaped, and you had this visions from God, and then you went into ministry. And man, it was not what you thought it was going to be. Especially those of you who really carried a heart for the presence of God and didn't want to get into forms and didn't want to sell out to all the build my church quick, fast schemes. You know, all this plan and that plan and 7 steps to grow your church and all that stuff. You just really wanted God. For a lot of those pastors, they're pastors of small churches. And they've seen over and over, they'll grow to a certain point, they'll hit something, back down they go. Go to something, hit something, down they go. Around and around in the desert. Years circling, burying the dead. Think about what that would have been like for those kids that were 18 and 19 and seeing the power, and then they spent the next 40 years. If that generation was born to be conquerors in the Promised Land. They were meant to go into the Promised Land in the days of their youth, in the strength of their youth, and they were meant to be conquerors and conquering and winning the cities and seeing the nation established, the Promised Land established. That was in their DNA. And that's in boomer DNA. You guys are a fierce generation. You're a warrior conquering generation. Look how much change you've brought in the church. A lot. Look how much change has happened in that window when you guys have been leading. You guys have broken through. So much understanding, so many things that have come through. The prophetic, intercession, the concept of taking our cities for God. You could just go on and on and on. Unity, there's so many things you guys have broken through in. Yet, most boomers I talk to are not satisfied. Actually, most boomers I talk to feel like they've never seen what they were looking for. If they're really honest, some of them feel like failures. Meanwhile, the Gen X, so imagine the Gen X, then we're the generation that was meant to be born in the Promised Land when the Promised Land was already established. Right? We are called to be temple builders and bring the glory of God. Once all that conquering and all that stuff's happened, it's like, whoa, let's build that temple. Let's see the glory of God. But what happened instead? We got born in the desert, circling around and our whole young life going, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? None of this feels right. Because you can't build a temple wandering in the desert. So we could never get nothing. That's why most Gen Xers can't tell you what they want. They just know what they don't want. And it's like, it's not that. Right? And so that's us. We're wandering around going, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. Then there's the millennials, who I believe are a signs and wonders generation. I believe the millennials were meant to be born in that analogy, a promised land filled with the glory of God. They're born where that's the norm. That God is just present everywhere. That's the norm. And from that, they take it out to the other nations. And they win the world, because that's what's in their hearts. As millennials, they are so focused on their friends and on the evangelism and wanting to see their generations saved. They're so that way, but they're a signs, wonders, miracles generation. They're meant to be, like I said, raised. They were meant to be raised in a church that was filled with the presence of God. And so millennials are frustrated and confused because they can't figure out either what the heck is going on. because they're also stuck out in the desert. And they're 2 steps removed. So in God's perfect plan and purposes and his redemptive purposes, I believe he wants us to all go in together. You get to conquer, we get to build, and they get to run. That's what's supposed to happen. But God is going to allow it to happen with us all together. It's not going to happen. You're not going without us. And we're not going without you. And they're not going without either of us. So we don't have a choice, this generational thing. We don't have a choice. And the heart is it's not about let's get together, let's dialogue, and let's try to find a common ground. It's let's stick together, let's worship, let's get in the presence of God and hear what he's saying. To see, he has a plan for all of this. And I'm telling you, like when we were in worship this morning, did any of you feel separated from everybody else in the room? Did you feel like, oh, she's just young and I'm a boomer, she's a Gen Xer, I don't feel connected to her at all? You felt totally connected because that's the one place we're going to always all connect, in the presence of God. We're not going to get around that. That's it. But on a practical level, I'll say to you this, boomers, they're looking for relationship. They don't want you to give them an assignment. They don't want you to give them a position in your church. They don't want you to give them a task to do. They want you. They want to know how you met your wife. They want you to invite them over for lunch and ask them, what's your story? How did you get here? And tell them yours. They want to know you. Know you. And all of us have that. All of us need to be known. You will be amazed what a blessing it'll be to you. Because they will not want you for what you have. They just want you. They just want to know you. That, and out of relationship, out of love, out of connection, that's where what God's purposes are going to be built. They're going to come out of it. They're going to flow out of it naturally like it was always meant to. Gen Xers, same thing. We call ourselves a relationship generation. Let's get on with it then. Instead of judging the boomers for, oh my God, they're so non-relational. Reach out. They're people. The Lord asked me one time, he gave me a 6-month window, and he said, I want you to go and get to as many pastors in your city. Do not talk about what you carry for the city. Do not talk about your visions or dreams. Just go to them, ask them for lunch or dinner, ask them if you could just honor them, ask them their life story, ask them how they got in ministry, how they got to Edmonton, and what has God shown them. Pastors were like their mouths dropped open. They sat with me for hours. I was shocked. You know how busy pastors are? You all know. These guys would sit with me for hours and talk. They were so amazed somebody wanted to know. But you know what? Because the Lord said to me, I want you to do that because I'm going to establish you as a trusted daughter in the city. And we got to know that as Xers. It's not an entitlement thing. We need to be trusted sons and daughters. We have that responsibility too. Millennials, we're coming. We're going to get this together. So that and I think the millennial generation, and we're seeing it with even what just happened with Amanda Tanner, they are so crying out for family and for someone to care, someone to love them. And right now, I'm sad to say we don't have a whole lot to give them because it's as broken in the church as it is in the world. But it isn't meant to be that way. That's not God's design. And if there's Gen Xers you can find, Gen Xers love you guys. Like, we love being around you. And if you just say to them, hey, you want to go for coffee? You want to talk? They would love it. They would love it. Start building that relationship. It sounds so simple, but it is simple. We just be the kingdom where you live. The kingdom is not an army, it is a family. That's how it started. It started with a God who was awesome above everything, making people just so he could hang out with them in the garden every day. He's a relational guy. And he means his kids to, and you know what? This is what, honestly, I believe with all my heart, this more than anything is going to be the light to the world, to a hurting and lost and broken world our society is broken down. There is no community in the world anymore. They have nothing else. Actually, they're right. They're never been so right because there's nothing else they have to fall back on. They're all lonely. They're all isolated. They're all wishing there's somebody who would care. And you know what? If they see family, they see people, believers, loving each other, hugging each other, kissing each other, talking together from all generations, they'll be like, what is this? Can I come? It's so simple. Does anybody, I know we're late, but any questions? Anybody has a question, burning question that has to be answered? Or statement or anything you want to say?
Really moved my heart. Oh God. Oh